welcome back. Welcome to the soothing world of Kenji Miyazawa's Night on the Galactic Railroad. Tonight, we embark on a magical journey through the cosmos with one of Japan's most beloved literary treasures. Night on the Galactic Railroad, is a profound and enchanting tale that takes listeners on a voyage across the Milky Way, exploring themes of life, death, and the eternal quest for meaning. Overview: Night on the Galactic Railroad follows the story of Giovanni, a young boy who embarks on a surreal journey aboard a celestial train. Accompanied by his friend Campanella, Giovanni travels through the galaxy, encountering a series of mystical and thought-provoking experiences. This journey allows Giovanni to reflect on his life, the nature of happiness, and the mysteries of existence. As you listen to this beautifully narrated story, allow yourself to drift into the serene and contemplative world created by Kenji Miyazawa. Let the gentle cadence of the narration guide you through the stars and into a peaceful slumber. Night on the Galactic Railroad, Kenji Miyazawa. Chapter 1, Afternoon Class. Well, everyone, do you know what this faintly white thing, which is said to be a river or the trace of milk, really is? The teacher asked the class while pointing to a large black diagram of a constellation hanging on the blackboard, indicating a misty white band that looked like the Milky Way. Campanella raised his hand. Then 4 or 5 others raised their hands. Giovanni also started to raise his hand, but quickly stopped. He had indeed read in a magazine that it was all stars, but recently Giovanni had been so sleepy in class every day, without time or books to read, that he felt he couldn't understand anything properly. However, the teacher had already noticed him. "Giovanni, you understand, don't you?" Giovanni stood up energetically, but found he could not answer clearly once he was standing. Zanelli turned around from his seat in front and laughed quietly at Giovanni. Giovanni became flustered and turned bright red. The teacher spoke again. "What is the Milky Way mostly composed of, as seen through a large telescope?" Giovanni thought it must be stars again, but still couldn't answer immediately. The teacher seemed troubled for a moment, then turned his gaze towards Campanella and called on him. "Well then, Campanella." But despite raising his hand so energetically earlier, Campanella stood up hesitantly and couldn't answer either. The teacher, looking somewhat surprised, stared at Campanella for a while, then quickly said, "All right, that's enough," and pointed to the star chart himself. "When you look at this faint white galaxy through a large, good telescope, it appears as countless small stars. Isn't that right, Giovanni?" Giovanni nodded, turning bright red. However, before he knew it, his eyes were filled with tears. "Yes, I knew that. Of course Campanella knew it too. It was in a magazine we once read together at Campanella's father's, the doctor's, house. Not only that, after reading that magazine, Campanella immediately brought a huge book from his father's study, opened the section on the Milky Way, and the two of us looked for a long time at the beautiful photograph filled with white dots on a pitch-black page. Campanella couldn't possibly have forgotten that. So the reason he didn't answer immediately must be that he felt sorry for me, knowing that lately I've been so tired from work, both in the morning and afternoon, that I haven't been playing energetically with everyone at school, and I haven't been talking much with Campanella either. Thinking about that, I felt an unbearable sense of pity for both Campanella and myself. The teacher spoke again. "Therefore, if we consider this Milky Way to be a real river, then each of these small stars corresponds to grains of sand or gravel at the bottom of that river. Moreover, if we think of it as a massive flow of milk, it resembles the Milky Way even more closely. In other words, the stars are like tiny globules of fat floating within the milk. So what corresponds to the water in this river? It is the vacuum that transmits light at a certain speed, and the sun and the earth also float within it. In short, we too are living within the water of the Milky Way. And when we look around from within the water of the Milky Way, just as water appears bluer the deeper it is, the deeper and farther regions of the Milky Way appear densely populated with stars, which therefore look faintly white. Look at this model." The teacher pointed to a large biconvex lens filled with many shining grains of sand. "The shape of the Milky Way is just like this. Consider that each of these shining grains is a star, self-luminous like our sun. Our sun is approximately in the middle of this, with the Earth very close to it. Imagine standing in the middle at night and looking around inside this lens. In this direction, the lens is thin, so you would see only a few shining grains, that is, stars. In this direction, the glass is thicker, so you would see many shining grains, that is, stars, and the distant ones would appear faintly white. This is the current theory of the Milky Way. Now, as for the size of this lens and the various stars within it, we will discuss them next time during the science class. Today is the festival of the Milky Way, so everyone, go outside and observe the sky. That's all for today. Put away your books and notebooks. The classroom was filled with the sounds of students opening and closing desk lids and stacking books. But soon everyone stood up properly, bowed, and left the classroom. Chapter 2. The Printing Office. When Giovanni left the school gate, 7 or 8 classmates gathered around Campanella at the corner of the schoolyard by the cherry tree instead of going home. They seemed to be discussing going to pick wild cucumbers to prepare blue lights to float on the river for tonight's star festival. However, Giovanni waved his hand energetically and walked briskly out of the school gate. In the town, people were preparing for tonight's Milky Way festival by hanging balls of holly leaves or lighting up cypress branches. Instead of going home, Giovanni turned through the town 3 times and entered a large printing office. He immediately bowed to a man in a loose white shirt at the calculation table near the entrance, took off his shoes, and went inside. He opened the large door at the end of the hall. Inside, although it was still daytime, the electric lights were on, and many rotary presses were turning with a loud noise. People with scarves tied around their heads or lampshades on were working diligently, reading or counting as if they were singing. Giovanni went straight to the person sitting at the 3rd high desk from the entrance and bowed. After searching the shelves for a while, the person handed him a piece of paper, saying, "Can you pick up this much?" Giovanni took a small flat box from under the desk and squatted in the corner of the wall where many electric lights were on. Using a small pair of tweezers, he started picking up types as small as millet grains, one by one. A man with a blue apron passed behind Giovanni, saying, "Hey, magnifying glass boy, good morning." 4 or 5 nearby people laughed coldly without making a sound or looking at him. Giovanni wiped his eyes many times as he continued picking up the types. Around 6 o'clock, after some time had passed, Giovanni, with the flat box full of the picked types, compared them once more with the piece of paper he had been given. He then brought it back to the person at the desk. The person received it silently and nodded slightly. Giovanni bowed, opened the door, and went back to the calculation table. The man in the white shirt silently handed Giovanni a small silver coin. Giovanni's face suddenly brightened, and he bowed energetically, grabbed the bag he had placed under the table, and rushed out. Then, whistling cheerfully, he stopped by the bakery to buy a loaf of bread and a bag of sugar cubes and started running at full speed. Chapter 3. Home. Giovanni energetically returned to a small house in a back alley. In the leftmost of the 3 adjoining entrances there were empty boxes planted with purple kale and asparagus, and the small windows remained covered with blinds. "Mom, I'm home. How are you feeling?" Giovanni said as he took off his shoes. "Oh, Giovanni, it must have been tough at work. It's been cool today. I've been feeling quite well all day." Giovanni climbed up the entryway, where his mother was lying down with a white cloth over her head in the room right at the entrance. Giovanni opened the window. "Mom, I bought some sugar cubes today. I thought I'd put them in your milk." "Oh, you have some first. I don't need any just yet." "Mom, when did sister come back?" "Oh, she came back around 3 o'clock. She helped with everything around here." "Mom, hasn't your milk arrived yet?" "It hasn't, has it? I'll go get it." "Oh, don't worry. You go ahead and eat first. Your sister made something with tomatoes and left it there. Then I'll eat it." Giovanni took the plate of tomatoes from the window and ate it with bread for a while. "Hey, Mom, I think Dad will definitely come back soon." "Oh, I think so too. But why do you think so?" "Because this morning's newspaper said that the northern fishing was very good this year." "Oh, but your father might not have gone fishing. He definitely did. There's no way Dad did something bad enough to get imprisoned. The big crab shell and reindeer antlers he brought to the school are still in the specimen room. Even the 6th graders take turns bringing them to class during lessons. On our field trip last year, Dad said he would bring you a sea otter coat next time, didn't he? Everyone says that to me when they see me. They tease me about it. Do they speak ill of you? Yes, but Campanella never says anything. When everyone else says such things, Campanella looks sorry. I heard that his father and yours were childhood friends, just like you two. Oh, that's why Dad used to take me to Campanella's house. Those were good times. On the way back from school, I often stopped by Campanella's house. They had a toy train that ran on alcohol lamps. When you put together 7 tracks, it formed a circle, and it had utility poles and signals too. The signal light turned blue only when the train passed. Once, when we ran out of alcohol and used kerosene, the can got completely sooty. Really? I still go to deliver the newspaper every morning, but the house is always quiet. It's early, you know. They have a dog named Sour. His tail is like a broom. When I go, he sniffs and follows me. He follows me all the way to the corner of the town, sometimes even farther. Tonight, everyone is going to float the lights of wild cucumbers on the river. I'm sure the dog will come along. That's right, tonight is the Milky Way Festival. Yes, I'll check it out while I get the milk. Go ahead, don't go into the river though. Oh, I'll just watch from the bank. I'll be back in an hour. Stay out longer. If you're with Campanella, I won't worry. Yes, we'll definitely be together. Mom, should I close the window? Yes, please do. It's cool now. Giovanni stood up, closed the window, and cleaned up the plates and bread bag. Then, putting on his shoes energetically, he said, I'll be back in an hour and a half, and stepped out into the dark doorway. Chapter 4, Night of the Centaur Festival. Giovanni walked down the slope of the town, lined with dark cedar trees, with a lonely, whistling mouth. At the bottom of the slope, a large street lamp stood proudly, glowing pale blue. As Giovanni approached the lamp, his shadow, which had been stretching out behind him like a monster, became darker, clearer, and more distinct. It moved to his side, lifting its feet and waving its hands. I'm a fine locomotive. This is a slope, so I'm fast. I'm going to pass that street lamp now. Look, my shadow is a compass. It spun around like that and came to the front, Giovanni thought as he took big strides past the street lamp. Suddenly, Zanelli, who had been wearing a new shirt with a pointed collar, appeared from a dark alley on the other side of the lamp and brushed past Giovanni. Zanelli, are you going to float wild cucumbers? Giovanni called out before he could finish speaking. Giovanni, a sea otter coat is coming from your father, Zanelli shouted back from behind, almost throwing the words at him. Giovanni's chest suddenly felt cold, and he felt a sharp ringing in his ears. What do you mean, Zanelli? Giovanni shouted back, but Zanelli had already entered a house planted with cypress trees on the other side. Why does Zanelli say such things when I've done nothing to him? He runs like a mouse. Zanelli must be a fool to say such things when I've done nothing, Giovanni thought, feeling frustrated. As he walked through the streets, beautifully decorated with various lights and branches, he was lost in his thoughts. In the watchmaker's shop, a neon light shone brightly, and the red eyes of a stone owl moved every second. Various jewels, placed on a thick glass plate the color of the sea, circled slowly like stars. On the other side, a copper centaur slowly rotated towards him. In the center, a round black star chart was decorated with blue asparagus leaves. Giovanni lost himself, staring at the star chart. It was much smaller than the one he saw at school earlier, but when he turned the dial to match the date and time, the sky at that moment appeared in the oval, with the Milky Way forming a faint, smoky band. It looked as if it was faintly exploding and giving off steam at the bottom. A small yellow telescope with 3 legs stood shining behind it, and on the farthest wall was a large map depicting constellations as strange beasts, snakes, fish, and jars. Giovanni wondered if there were really such scorpions and heroes densely packed in the sky. He wanted to walk through it forever and stood there in a daze for a while. Then, suddenly remembering his mother's milk, Giovanni left the shop. Adjusting his tight jacket, he walked through the town with a deliberate chest-out stride, swinging his arms wide. The air was so clear, it flowed through the streets and shops like water. The street lamps were all wrapped in blue fir and oak branches, and the 6 plane trees in front of the electric company had many small bulbs lit inside, making the area look like a mermaid's city. Children, all wearing new clothes with folded sleeves, played happily, whistling the Star Parade song and shouting, "Centaurus, let the dew fall," or lighting blue magnesium fireworks. But Giovanni, with his head bowed, thinking of entirely different things from the lively surroundings, hurried towards the milk shop. Giovanni found himself in a place where several poplar trees stood high, floating in the starry sky on the outskirts of town. He entered the black gate of the milk shop and stood in front of the dimly lit kitchen that smelled of cows. He took off his hat and said, "Good evening," but the house was silent as if no one was there. "Good evening, excuse me." Giovanni called out again, standing straight. After a while, an old woman, looking unwell, came out slowly and mumbled something about what he needed. The milk didn't come to our house today, so I came to get it," Giovanni said as calmly as he could. "No one is here now, so I don't know. Please come back tomorrow," the woman said, looking down at Giovanni while rubbing under her red eyes. "My mother is sick, so I need it tonight." "Then come back a little later," she said, about to leave. "Okay, thank you," Giovanni said, bowing and leaving the kitchen. As he turned the corner of the intersection, he saw 6 or 7 students, including shadows and dim white shirts, in front of a general store near the bridge, whistling and laughing, each holding a wild cucumber lantern. He recognized their voices and whistles. They were Giovanni's classmates. Giovanni hesitated and almost turned back, but decided to walk towards them energetically. "Are you going to the river?" Giovanni tried to say, feeling a lump in his throat. "Giovanni, a sea otter coat is coming from your father," Zanelli shouted again. "Giovanni, a sea otter coat is coming from your father," everyone else echoed. Giovanni turned red, and not knowing if he was walking, he hurried past them. Then he saw Campanella among them. Campanella looked at Giovanni sympathetically, smiling slightly, as if wondering if Giovanni would be angry. Giovanni avoided his gaze, feeling as if he was fleeing, and soon everyone started whistling. As he turned the corner, he saw Zanelli looking back at him, and Campanella, too, was walking towards the bridge, blowing his whistle high. Feeling indescribably lonely, Giovanni suddenly started running. Little children who had been hopping on one foot while covering their ears shouted, thinking Giovanni was running for fun. Soon, Giovanni hurried towards the dark hill. Chapter 5. The weather wheel pillar behind the pasture. A gentle hill rose, and its black, flat summit appeared faintly lower than usual beneath the northern Great Bear constellation. Giovanni steadily climbed up the small path through the dew-covered grove. The narrow path, illuminated faintly by starlight, wound its way through the dark grass and various shapes of dense undergrowth. Among the grass, small insects emitted a sparkling blue light, making some leaves appear translucent and blue, reminding Giovanni of the wild cucumber lights everyone had taken earlier. As he crossed the dark grove of pine and oak trees, the sky suddenly opened up, revealing the Milky Way stretching faintly from south to north. He could also see the weather wheel pillar at the summit. Flowers, perhaps bellflowers or wild chrysanthemums, bloomed all around, as if their fragrance was wafting from a dream. A bird flew over the hill, chirping continuously. Giovanni reached the base of the weather wheel pillar at the summit and threw his throbbing body onto the cool grass. The town lights glowed in the darkness, resembling the scenery of a palace at the bottom of the sea. The faint sounds of children singing, whistling, and scattered shouts could also be heard. The wind whistled in the distance, and the grass on the hill gently swayed. Giovanni's sweat-soaked shirt was cooled by the breeze. He looked out over the vast, dark plain that stretched from the edge of the town. He heard the sound of a train. The windows of the small train appeared as a row of tiny red lights, and Giovanni imagined many travelers inside, peeling apples, laughing, and doing various things. This made Giovanni feel an indescribable sadness, and he looked up at the sky again. Ah, they say that white band in the sky is all made of stars. But no matter how long he looked, the sky did not seem like the cold, empty place the teacher had described during the day. On the contrary, the more he looked, the more he felt it resembled a field with small groves and pastures. Giovanni saw the blue star of the lyre appear to split into 3 or 4 stars, twinkling and extending its legs in and out until it finally stretched out like a mushroom. He also thought the town below appeared like a large, faint cluster of stars or a single large puff of smoke. Chapter 6. The Galactic Station. Giovanni saw that the weather wheel pillar behind him had transformed into the shape of a hazy triangular marker, flickering like a firefly, fading in and out. It gradually became clearer and eventually stood firm in the dark steel blue sky. It stood straight and clean in the sky field like a newly forged blue steel plate. Then, somewhere, he heard a strange voice saying, "Galactic Station, Galactic Station," and suddenly, everything before him lit up brilliantly. It was as if millions of firefly squids had all lit up at once and were sinking into the sky, or as if someone had deliberately spilled a stash of diamonds, kept hidden to keep their prices high, and scattered them all at once. Giovanni rubbed his eyes several times in astonishment. When he became aware of his surroundings again, he realized he had been riding a small train all along, clattering steadily. Giovanni was indeed sitting in a compartment with small yellow lamps, looking out the window of a night train. The seats, upholstered in blue velvet, were almost entirely empty, and on the far gray varnished wall, 2 large brass buttons gleamed. He noticed a tall child in a wet-looking black jacket sitting in the seat directly in front of him, looking out the window. Giovanni felt as though he recognized the child's shoulders and desperately wanted to know who it was. As he was about to lean out the window himself, the child suddenly pulled his head back and looked at Giovanni. It was Campanella. When Giovanni was about to ask, "Campanella, have you been here all along?" Campanella said, "Everyone ran so fast, but they fell behind. Even Zanelli ran a lot, but couldn't catch up." Giovanni thought, "Yes, we did go out together," and said, "Should we wait somewhere?" Campanella replied, "Zanelli has already gone back. His father came to get him." As he spoke, Campanella's face turned slightly pale, and he seemed to be in some discomfort. Giovanni, too, felt a strange sensation as if he had forgotten something important and fell silent. But then Campanella, looking out the window, suddenly recovered and said energetically, "Oh, no, I forgot my canteen and sketchbook. But it's all right. The swan station is coming up soon. I love looking at swans. Even if they're flying far away over the river, I can spot them." Campanella enthusiastically spun a round map in front of him. Indeed, it showed a single railway line following the left bank of the Milky Way, heading south. The map was intricately detailed, with each station, triangular markers, springs, and forests beautifully illuminated in blue, orange, and green lights on the pitch-black surface, resembling the night sky. Giovanni felt as if he had seen this map somewhere before. "Where did you get this map? It's made of obsidian, isn't it?" Giovanni asked. "I got it at the Galactic Station." "Didn't you get one?" "Oh, I wonder if I passed the Galactic Station. We're here now, aren't we?" Giovanni pointed just north of the station marked Swan. "That's right. Oh, is that a moonlit riverbank?" Looking in that direction, they saw the silver-colored grasses of the Milky Way swaying and rippling in the wind. "It's not moonlight, it's glowing because it's the Milky Way," Giovanni said, feeling so joyful he wanted to jump. He tapped his feet and stuck his head out the window, whistling the Star Parade song as loudly as he could while stretching to get a better look at the Milky Way's water. Initially, he couldn't see it clearly, but as he focused, he noticed that the beautiful water was more transparent than glass or hydrogen, sometimes forming tiny purple waves or glinting like a rainbow, flowing silently and rapidly. In the field, numerous phosphorescent triangular markers stood beautifully, large ones nearby and small ones farther away, some in orange and yellow, others in blue and white, some triangular, some quadrangular, or shaped like lightning or chains, all shining brightly across the field. Giovanni felt his heart pounding and shook his head vigorously. The various shining triangular markers seemed to shimmer and flicker as if they were breathing. "I have come to the celestial field," Giovanni said. "And this train isn't burning coal," he added, leaning out the window to look ahead. "It's probably running on alcohol or electricity," Campanella replied. The small, beautiful train continued to run endlessly through the silver glow of the Milky Way grasses and the pale blue light of the triangular markers. "Look, gentian flowers are blooming. It's already autumn," Campanella said, pointing outside the window. Amid the short grass along the tracks, magnificent purple gentian flowers bloomed as if carved from moonstone. "I'll jump out, pick one, and jump back in," Giovanni said excitedly. "No, you can't. We've passed it already," Campanella said. Before he could finish, another gentian flower glowed brightly and passed by. Then, more and more cups of gentian flowers with yellow bottoms seemed to burst forth like rain, passing by one after another. The rows of triangular markers glowed ever more brightly, burning like fire. Chapter 7. The Northern Cross and Pliocene Coast. "Do you think my mother will forgive me?" Suddenly, as if making a decision, Campanella said hurriedly, stammering slightly. Giovanni thought, "Oh, right, my mother is somewhere near that orange triangular marker that looks like a distant speck, thinking about me right now," and stared vacantly, remaining silent. "I will do anything if it means my mother will truly be happy. But what exactly is the best thing for her happiness?" Campanella seemed to be holding back tears with all his might. "Your mother hasn't done anything wrong," Giovanni exclaimed in surprise. "I don't know, but anyone who does something truly good will be the happiest, right? So I think my mother will forgive me." Campanella looked as if he had made up his mind about something. Suddenly, the inside of the car became brightly lit. They looked out and saw water flowing silently and shapelessly over the splendid Milky Way riverbed, as if adorned with diamonds, dewdrops, and all sorts of brilliance. In the middle of that flow, a dimly glowing bluish island appeared. At the flat peak of the island stood a magnificent white cross, shining with a crisp golden halo as if it were made of frozen polar clouds, standing silently for eternity. "Hallelujah, hallelujah," voices arose from front and back. When they turned around, they saw that all the passengers in the car had their clothes neatly arranged, holding black Bibles to their chests or rosary beads made of crystal, all modestly clasping their fingers together in prayer. Both Giovanni and Campanella stood up straight without thinking. Campanella's cheeks glowed beautifully, like the red of a ripe apple. As the island and the cross gradually moved behind them, the opposite shore also glowed faintly blue and misty. Occasionally, the silver reeds swayed in the wind, giving off a silvery mist, as if someone had breathed on them, and numerous gentian flowers appeared and disappeared among the grass like gentile will-o'-the-wisps. Soon, the river and the train were obscured by rows of reeds, and the Swan Island became smaller and smaller, like a picture, until it finally disappeared altogether. Behind Giovanni, a tall Catholic nun with a black veil, who had been sitting there all along, stared intently at the ground with round green eyes, as if reverently listening for words or sounds from the island. The travelers quietly returned to their seats, and Giovanni and Campanella, with a new feeling that resembled deep sadness, began to talk softly in different words. "We're almost at Swan Station." "Yes, we'll arrive exactly at 11. Soon, the green light of a signal and the dim white post passed by the window, and then the dark, faint light of a switch lever passed under the window. The train gradually slowed down, and soon a row of beautiful, orderly platform lights appeared, growing larger and wider until they stopped right in front of the large clock at Swan Station. On the face of the refreshing autumn clock, the two blue steel hands pointed sharply to 11. Everyone got off the train at once, leaving the car empty. 20-minute stop was written under the clock. "Shall we get off and take a look?" Giovanni said. "Let's do that." They jumped up and ran out the door towards the ticket gate. However, there was only a single bright purplish lamp on, and no one was there. They saw no station master or porter anywhere. They walked out into a small square surrounded by what looked like crystal-made ginkgo trees. From there, a wide road led straight into the blue light of the Milky Way. The people who had gotten off earlier were nowhere to be seen. As the two walked shoulder to shoulder along the white road, their shadows spread out like two columns in a room with windows on all sides, or like the spokes of two wheels, radiating in all directions. Soon they arrived at the beautiful riverbank they had seen from the train. Campanella picked up a handful of the beautiful sand and let it slip through his fingers, saying dreamily, "This sand is all crystal. There's a small fire burning inside." "Yes," Giovanni answered vaguely, wondering where he had learned such a thing. The pebbles on the riverbank were all transparent, clearly made of crystal, topaz, and some with crumpled wrinkles, and others that emitted a bluish-white light like mist from their edges. Giovanni ran to the shore and dipped his hand in the water. But the mysterious water of the Milky Way was more transparent than hydrogen. Yet, he could tell it was flowing because the part of their wrists, submerged in the water, appeared slightly silvery, and the waves created by their wrists shimmered beautifully with a phosphorescent glow. Looking upstream, they saw a white rock, flat like a playground, extending along the river under a cliff covered with reeds. There, 5 or 6 small figures seemed to be digging or burying something, standing and crouching, occasionally flashing tools. "Let's go see," they both shouted at once and ran towards it. At the entrance to the White Rock area, a smooth ceramic sign read Pliocene Coast. On the opposite shore, thin iron railings were placed here and there, and neat wooden benches were set up. "Hey, there's something strange here," Campanella said, stopping curiously and picking up something black and elongated like a pointed walnut from the rock. "It's a walnut. There are lots of them. They didn't wash up here. They're embedded in the rock. These walnuts are huge, twice the usual size, and not damaged at all. Let's go over there and see. They're definitely digging up something." Holding the jagged black walnuts, they approached the place they had seen earlier. On the left shore, waves gently lapped like soft lightning, and on the right cliff, silver-tipped reeds swayed as if made of shells. As they got closer, they saw a tall scholar with thick glasses and long boots, busy writing in a notebook while directing 3 assistants, ding picks and scopes. "Be careful not to break that projection. Use the scope, use the scope. No, not from that close. Dig from farther away. That's too rough," the scholar shouted. Looking closely, they saw a large bluish beast skeleton partially excavated from the soft white rock, lying sideways and crushed. There were 10 neatly cut squares of rock, each with hoof marks, all numbered. "Are you here to observe?" The scholar, glancing at them through his glasses, spoke. "You found lots of walnuts, right? These are from about 1.2 million years ago, from the more recent era. This area was a coastline about 1.2 million years ago, and shells also come out from below. The seawater used to flow in and out exactly where the river is now. This beast is called a boz, an ancestor of modern cattle, and there were many of them." "Are you making it into a specimen?" "No. It's needed for verification. We think this is a significant stratum from about 1.2 million years ago, but we need to confirm if others see it the same way. They might see it as wind or water erosion or just empty sky. Do you understand?" "Oh, be careful with that pick. There should be ribs buried right underneath," the scholar said, hurrying over. "It's time to go. Let's leave," Campanella said, comparing his map and wristwatch. "Yes, we should excuse ourselves," Giovanni said, bowing politely to the scholar. "All right then. Goodbye," the scholar said, looking busy as he resumed his supervision. The two ran over the white rocks, trying not to miss the train. They ran like the wind, without losing breath or feeling their knees burn. Giovanni thought that if they could run like this, they could run anywhere in the world. They passed the previous riverbank, and the lights of the ticket gate grew larger until they were back in their seats in the car, looking out the window at the direction they had just come from. Chapter 8. The Birdcatcher. "May I sit here?" A rough but kind-sounding adult voice spoke from behind the two boys. It was a red-bearded man wearing a slightly tattered brown overcoat and carrying 2 bundles wrapped in white cloth slung over his shoulders. "Sure, it's okay," Giovanni said, slightly hunching his shoulders in greeting. The man smiled faintly through his beard and slowly placed his bundles on the luggage rack. Giovanni felt a deep sense of loneliness and sadness and silently stared at the clock in front of him. In the distance, a sound like a glass flute played. The train was already moving quietly. Campanella was looking around the ceiling of the car. A black beetle had landed on one of the lights, casting a large shadow on the ceiling. The red-bearded man, with a nostalgic smile, watched Giovanni and Campanella. The train gradually picked up speed. and the reeds and the river alternated shining through the window. The red-bearded man hesitantly asked the two boys, "Where are you headed?" "We're going wherever this train takes us," Giovanni replied, a little embarrassed. "That's good. This train can take you anywhere." "Where are you going?" Campanella suddenly asked, almost combatively, making Giovanni laugh involuntarily. The man with the pointed hat and large key at his waist, who was sitting across from them, also glanced over and chuckled, causing Campanella to blush and laugh as well. The man didn't seem offended and responded with a twitching smile. "I'm getting off soon. I'm a bird catcher by trade." "What kind of birds do you catch?" "Cranes and geese, and also herons and swans." "Are there many cranes?" "Yes, plenty. They've been calling out for a while now. Didn't you hear them?" "No. Listen carefully. You can still hear them now." The two boys raised their heads and listened intently. Amidst the clattering of the train and the rustling of the reeds, they could hear a sound like bubbling water. "How do you catch cranes?" "Cranes or herons," Giovanni answered, not really caring which. "Well, it's not difficult. Herons are made from the solidified sand of the Milky Way, and they always return to the river. So you wait by the riverbank, and when the herons land with their legs like this, you catch them just as their feet are about to touch the ground. Then the herons, feeling safe, die instantly. After that, it's just a matter of pressing them flat." "Do you press herons flat? Are they for specimens?" "Not specimens, they're for eating." "That's strange," Campanella said, tilting his head. "There's nothing strange about it. Here." The man stood up, took a bundle from the luggage rack, and quickly unwrapped it. "Look, I just caught these." "They really are herons," the two boys exclaimed involuntarily. About 10 herons, as white and shining as the Northern Cross they had seen earlier, lay slightly flattened with their black legs folded, looking like bas-relief sculptures. "Their eyes are closed," Campanella said, gently touching the crescent-shaped closed eyes of a heron with his finger. The spear-like white feathers on its head were still attached. "See?" The birdcatcher rewrapped the herons in the cloth and tied it up with a string. Giovanni wondered who would eat herons around here and asked, "Are herons tasty?" "Yes, there are orders every day, but geese sell better. They're more elegant and easier to prepare. Look." The birdcatcher unwrapped another bundle. Inside, yellow and bluish geese, looking almost like they were illuminated, lay flattened like the herons, with their beaks aligned. "These can be eaten right away. Would you like to try some?" The birdcatcher lightly pulled on the leg of a yellow goose. It came apart cleanly, almost as if it were made of chocolate. "Go ahead, try a piece," he said, breaking it in half and handing it to them. Giovanni took a bite, thinking, "This is just candy. It tastes better than chocolate, but there's no way such geese are flying around. This man must be a confectioner from some field, but I feel sorry for him, eating his candy while thinking he's a fool." Despite these thoughts, Giovanni continued to eat. "Have some more," the birdcatcher offered another bundle. Giovanni wanted more, but said, "No, thank you." The birdcatcher then offered it to the man with the key. "I can't accept anything from a merchant," the man said, removing his hat. "Don't mention it. By the way, how is the migratory bird season this year?" "It's fantastic. Just the other day, around the second shift, we got complaints from both sides about why the lighthouse signal was irregular. But it wasn't our doing. The migratory birds were so densely packed, they blocked the light. I told them there's no point complaining to me. Take it to the big boss with the ridiculously long legs and beaky mouth. Haha." With the reeds gone, light suddenly streamed in from the opposite field. "Why is it troublesome to prepare herons?" Campanella asked, having wanted to know for a while. "To prepare herons," the birdcatcher turned towards them, "you have to hang them in the Milky Way light for 10 days, or bury them in the sand for 3 or 4 days. Then the mercury evaporates, making them edible." "This isn't a bird, it's just candy, isn't it?" Campanella asked, seemingly having the same thought as Giovanni. The birdcatcher, looking somewhat flustered, said, Yes, I need to get off here," and stood up, grabbed his luggage, and disappeared. Where did he go? The two boys looked at each other, while the lighthouse keeper grinned and stretched up to look out the window beside them. When they looked too, they saw the birdcatcher standing in a field of glowing yellow and bluish luminescent flowers, looking solemnly at the sky with his arms spread wide. "He's over there. How strange. He must be catching birds again. I hope birds land before the train leaves," Campanella said. At that moment, herons, like the ones they had seen earlier, came airing down like falling snow, crying out. The birdcatcher looked pleased, spread his legs to exactly 60 degrees, and caught the descending black legs of the herons, putting them into his cloth bag. The herons glowed like fireflies in the bag, but soon turned faintly white and closed their eyes. However, more herons managed to land safely on the Milky Way sand than were caught. As soon as their feet touched the sand, they melted like snow and spread out like molten copper on the sand and gravel, leaving a bird-shaped imprint that glowed a few times before blending in with the surroundings. After catching about 20 herons, the birdcatcher suddenly raised his arms as if struck by a bullet, and then disappeared, leaving only his voice. "Ah, that was satisfying. There's nothing better than earning just enough to suit your body," a familiar voice said beside Giovanni. Looking over, he saw the birdcatcher neatly stacking the herons he had caught. "How did you get here so quickly?" Giovanni asked, feeling both normal and strange. "Because I wanted to come." "So, where are you two from?" Giovanni wanted to answer immediately, but couldn't think of where they had come from. Campanella turned red, trying to remember. "Ah, from far away," the birdcatcher nodded understandingly. Chapter 9. Giovanni's Ticket. We're now at the end of the Swan District. Look, there's the famous Albireo Observatory. In the middle of the Milky Way, which looked like it was filled with fireworks, stood 4 large black buildings. On the flat roof of one of them, 2 large transparent spheres of sapphire and topaz spun quietly in a ring, mesmerizingly blue and yellow. The yellow sphere slowly moved away, and the small blue sphere came forward, overlapping to form a beautiful green double convex lens. As they continued to move, the center bulged out until the blue sphere was directly in front of the topaz, creating a bright yellow ring around a green center. This pattern then reversed, separating until the blue sphere circled back to its position, creating a similar spectacle. Surrounded by the shapeless, soundless waters of the Milky Way, the black observatory lay quietly as if asleep. "That is an instrument for measuring the speed of the water." "Water too," the birdcatcher began to say. "Tickets, please." A tall conductor in a red hat stood beside their seats, asking to see their tickets. The birdcatcher silently pulled out a small piece of paper from his pocket. The conductor glanced at it, then looked over to Giovanni and Campanella, extending his hand expectantly. "All right," Giovanni stammered, fumbling nervously. Campanella calmly produced a small gray ticket. Giovanni, flustered, reached into his coat pocket, wondering if there might be a ticket there. He felt something large and folded, and hurriedly pulled it out. It was a green piece of paper, about the size of a postcard folded into quarters. The conductor took it and carefully unfolded it, examining it with great interest. As he read, he straightened his jacket and adjusted his buttons, while the lighthouse keeper peered at it from below with great curiosity. Giovanni began to think it might be some kind of certificate, feeling a warm sensation in his chest. "Did you get this from the third dimensi on?" the conductor asked. "I don't know," Giovanni answered, relieved and chuckling slightly. "Very well. We'll arrive at the Southern Cross around the next 3rd hour." The conductor handed back the paper and moved on. Campanella, curious about the paper, eagerly leaned in to see it. Giovanni also wanted to examine it, but as they looked, they saw it was filled with strange characters and intricate black designs. It felt as if the patterns were drawing them in. The birdcatcher glanced at it from the side and, startled, exclaimed, "Oh, this is extraordinary. This ticket can take you even to the heavens. It's a pass that allows you to go anywhere at will. With this, you can travel through this imperfect illusion of the 4th-dimensional Milky Way Railway to any place." "I don't really understand," Giovanni said, blushing and tucking the paper back into his pocket. Feeling awkward, he and Campanella returned to gazing out the window, aware of the birdcatcher occasionally glancing at them, as if impressed. "We're nearing the Eagle Station," Campanella said, comparing the 3 small bluish triangular markers outside with the map. Giovanni felt a sudden, inexplicable pity for the birdcatcher. reflecting on how the man had expressed satisfaction with catching herons and wrapped them in white cloth, and how he had been startled by the ticket and praised it hurriedly. Giovanni felt an overwhelming desire to give the bird-catcher anything he had, even if it meant standing on the glowing sands of the Milky Way for 100 years, catching birds to ensure the man's true happiness. He could no longer stay silent, and was about to ask the bird-catcher what he truly wanted when he noticed the bird-catcher was no longer there. Neither was the white package on the luggage rack. He quickly looked outside, thinking the bird-catcher might be preparing to catch herons, but he saw only the beautiful sandy landscape and the white waves of the pampas grass, with no sign of the bird. Fire beyond the markers glowed brightly, and the triangular markers formed the shape of a scorpion's arms and tail, with the red fire burning silently. As the fire faded behind them, the sound of joyous music, the smell of flowers, and the murmur of voices filled the air. It felt like a festival was happening nearby. "Centaurus, let it rain," a boy shouted, looking out the window. A blue cypress or fir tree, adorned with countless tiny lights like a Christmas tree, stood in the distance. "Tonight is the Centaurus festival," Campanella said. "We're in the village of Centaurus," he added. The manuscript ended there. "I never miss at ball throwing," the boy boasted. "We'll arrive at the Southern Cross soon. Get ready to disembark," the young man said. "I'll stay on the train a bit longer," the boy said. Giovanni couldn't hold back and said, "Come with us. We have tickets to go anywhere. But we must get off here. It's the path to heaven." The girl said sadly, "We don't need to go to heaven. We should build a better place here," Giovanni said. "But Mother is there and God is calling us," the girl said. "That's a false God," Giovanni said. "Your God is false," the girl retorted. "No, he isn't," Giovanni insisted. "What kind of God is he?" the young man asked, smiling. "I don't know well, but he's the true God," Giovanni said. "The true God is, of course, one," the young man replied. "Yes, the one true God," Giovanni said. "I pray you will meet the true God," the young man said, folding his hands. Everyone looked sad, and Giovanni felt he might cry out loud. "Are you ready? We're almost at the Southern Cross." At that moment, the invisible Milky Way downstream lit up with a cross, adorned with blue and orange lights, standing like a tree, with a blue halo around it. The train car buzzed, and everyone stood and began to pray. Children and adults alike expressed their joy and reverence. The train slowed and stopped directly opposite the cross. "It's time to get off," the young man said, leading the boy by the hand. "Goodbye," the girl said, looking back at Giovanni and Campanella. "Goodbye," Giovanni said, holding back tears. The girl looked sad, but she turned and left. The train car was half empty, feeling suddenly lonely as the wind blew in. Watching, Giovanni saw the passengers kneeling by the riverbank before the cross. Through the invisible Milky Way, a divine figure in white came forward. As the train moved, a silver mist rose from the river, obscuring the view, revealing only shining walnut trees and electric squirrels with golden halos. The mist began to clear, revealing a row of small streetlights along a road, following the tracks. The lights greeted them by blinking off as they passed, then back on. Looking back, the cross became small, almost like a pendant, making it hard to tell if the passengers were still kneeling or had gone to heaven. Giovanni sighed deeply. "Campanella, it's just the two of us again. Let's go on together forever. I'd sacrifice myself like the scorpion for everyone's happiness," Giovanni said. "Me too," Campanella replied, tears in his eyes. "What is true happiness?" Giovanni asked. "I don't know," Campanella replied. "We'll find out together," Giovanni said, feeling a new strength. "Oh, there's a coal sack, a hole in the sky," Campanella pointed. Giovanni was startled. A large dark hole gaped in the Milky Way. No matter how hard he looked, he couldn't see the bottom, only feeling his eyes ache. "I'm not afraid of the dark anymore. I'll seek true happiness. Let's go on together," Giovanni said. "Yes, let's go. Oh, that field is beautiful. Everyone's there. That's the true heaven. Look, there's my mother," Campanella exclaimed. Giovanni looked but saw only a hazy whiteness and felt an inexplicable sadness. Far off, two telegraph poles seemed to link arms with red crossbars. "Campanella, let's stay together," Giovanni said, turning, but Campanella was gone. Only the black velvet seat remained. "Gio?" Vanni stood up, leaned out the window, and screamed silently, then sobbed uncontrollably as darkness engulfed him. Giovanni opened his eyes, finding himself lying in the grass, exhausted. His chest felt strange and warm tears ran down his cheeks. He sprang up. The town below was still lit, but the lights seemed warmer. The Milky Way still arched white in the sky, with the red star of Scorpio gleaming beautifully. The stars' positions hadn't changed much. Giovanni ran down the hill, thinking of his mother waiting for dinner and his father's return. He hurried through the dark pine forest, past the white fences of the pasture, and back to the dark cowshed. A cart carrying 2 barrels stood there, having just arrived. "Good evening," Giovanni called. "Good evening," a man in white trousers replied. "What do you need?" "We didn't get our milk today," Giovanni said. "Oh, I'm sorry." The man fetched a bottle of milk and handed it to Giovanni, explaining, "I accidentally left the calf's pen open this afternoon, and it drank half of the milk." "I see. I'll take this then." "Thank you." Giovanni, holding the warm bottle, walked back through the town. He passed a crossroads and saw the bridge where he had released the lights with Campanella, now illuminated. Women were gathered, whispering and watching the bridge. Lights filled the bridge. Giovanni felt a chill and asked, "What happened?" "A child fell into the river," one woman said, and everyone looked at Giovanni. He ran to the bridge, where a crowd blocked the view of the river. Policemen in white uniforms were present. Giovanni rushed to the wide river bank. Along the water's edge, lights moved busily up and down. Dark figures with lanterns searched the far bank. In the middle, where the unseen river flowed, many people stood black against the lights. Giovanni ran towards them and met Marso, who ran to him. "Giovanni, Campanella fell into the river." "When? How?" "Zanelli tried to push the lanterns with a boat and fell. Campanella jumped in and pushed Zanelli to safety, but now he's gone." "Are they searching?" "Yes, everyone came. Campanella's father is here, but they can't find him. Zanelli was taken home." Giovanni approached the group, seeing Campanella's father, a man with a sharp chin in a black suit, staring at his watch. Everyone watched the river silently. Giovanni's legs trembled with anxiety. Acetylene lamps flashed as they moved, and the dark river shimmered with small waves. Downstream, the Milky Way reflected, making the river look like the sky. Giovanni felt as if Campanella was only at the Milky Way's edge, but everyone seemed to expect Campanella to reappear or be waiting on a hidden island. Suddenly, Campanella's father said firmly, "It's no use. It's been 45 minutes." Giovanni wanted to shout that he knew where Campanella was, that he had been with him, but he choked and couldn't speak. The doctor looked at Giovanni, then said, "You're Giovanni, right? Thank you for tonight." Giovanni nodded silently. "Has your father returned?" "No. I heard he was well a few days ago. He should be back by now. Giovanni, come visit us tomorrow after school." With that, the doctor turned back to the river. Giovanni, his heart full, ran towards town, thinking of his mother and his father's return. He sprinted through the dark riverbank towards home. Atcher's broad back or pointed hat. "Where did he go?" Campanella muttered absent-mindedly. "Where could he have gone? When will we meet him again? Why didn't I speak to him more?" Giovanni said, feeling distraught. "I think the same," Campanella replied. "I felt as if he was in my way, and now I feel terrible," Giovanni admitted, experiencing such strange emotions for the first time and saying things he had never said before. "I smell apples. Is it because I was thinking about them?" Campanella said, looking around curiously. "Yes, I smell apples and wild roses too," Giovanni said, also looking around, realizing the scent seemed to be coming through the window. He wondered how wild roses could bloom at this time of year. Suddenly they saw a 6-year-old boy with shiny black hair, wearing a red jacket without fastening the buttons, looking startled and barefoot, standing and shivering. Next to him stood a tall young man in a neat black suit, firmly holding the boy's hand, looking like a tree swaying in the wind. "Oh my, where are we? How beautiful!" a 12-year-old girl with brown eyes and a black coat exclaimed, clinging to the young man's arm and looking out the window in amazement. "Oh, this is Lancashire. No, Connecticut. No, we're in the sky. We're going to heaven. Look, that sign is the sign of the heavens. There's nothing to fear." "We've been called by God," the young man said, glowing with joy but also looking exhausted and furrowing his brow as he gently sat the boy next to Giovanni. He then softly pointed to the seat next to Campanella for the girl. She obediently sat down and clasped her hands together. I'm going to see my big sister, the boy said, making a strange face as he sat next to the lighthouse keeper. The young man looked at him with an indescribable sadness, staring intently at the boy's curly, wet hair. The girl suddenly covered her face with her hands and began to sob. Father and Sister Kiku still have work to do, but they'll come soon. Mother has been waiting for a long time, worrying and thinking about what songs her dear Tadashi is singing now, and wondering if he's playing hand in hand with his friends in the snowy morning around the grove. Let's go meet her soon. Yes, but I shouldn't have boarded the ship, the boy said. Yes, but look at that beautiful river. Don't you remember how you could see it faintly white from the window whenever we sang Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star all summer? Isn't it beautiful? The young man said, stroking the boy's wet black hair and comforting everyone, his face gradually lighting up. Where did you come from? What happened? The lighthouse keeper finally asked, understanding a little. The young man smiled faintly. We hit an iceberg and the ship sank. We left 2 months ago because their father had to return home urgently. I was a tutor, and we left 12 days ago. Last night, or the night before, the ship hit an iceberg and began to sink. The moonlight was faint and the fog was thick. The lifeboats on the port side were damaged, so there wasn't enough space for everyone. As the ship sank, I desperately begged to let the children on the lifeboats. People made way and prayed for the children, but I couldn't push through the remaining children and parents to reach the boats. Still, I felt it was my duty to save these children, and I tried to push the others aside. But I also thought it might be better for everyone to die together, rather than defy God's will. Then, a life buoy was thrown towards us. It slipped away, but we clung to the grating of the deck, waiting for the ship to sink. A voice called out a number, and everyone sang together in different languages. We were pulled into the water, thinking we were caught in a whirlpool, but when we awoke, we found ourselves here. Their mother passed away last year. I believe the lifeboat must have been saved by skilled sailors. Small prayers were heard, and Giovanni and Campanella remembered forgotten things, and Ella felt their eyes warm. Oh, that vast sea must be the Pacific Ocean. In the northern reaches of the sea, where icebergs drift, someone is working hard on a small boat, battling the wind, freezing spray, and intense cold. I feel sorry for them and wonder what I can do for their happiness, Giovanni thought, bowing his head in deep contemplation. We don't know what true happiness is, but even the most painful experiences, if they are part of the right path, bring us closer to true happiness with each step, the lighthouse keeper consoled. Yes, everything, including all the sadness, is meant to bring us closer to the ultimate happiness, the young man replied, as if praying. The siblings, exhausted, leaned back and fell asleep. The boy was now wearing soft white shoes instead of being barefoot. The train continued along the beautiful, luminous riverbank. Looking through the opposite window, the fields appeared like a magic lantern show, with countless triangular markers adorned with red dots, shimmering in the rosy air filled with the scent of roses. Have you ever seen such apples? The lighthouse keeper asked, cradling a large apple beautifully colored in gold and crimson. Where did you get these? They're magnificent. Do such apples grow around here? The young man exclaimed, looking at the apples in the lighthouse keeper's hands. Please, take one. Go ahead, take one, the young man offered. The young man picked one up and glanced at Giovanni and Campanella. Boys, would you like one? He offered. Giovanni was slightly annoyed at being called a boy, but remained silent. Campanella said, Thank you. The young man handed an apple to each of them, and Giovanni stood up to thank him. The lighthouse keeper, now with both hands free, gently placed an apple on each sleeping sibling's lap. Thank you. Where do these beautiful apples come from? The young man asked, examining them closely. In this area, farming is done with little effort. Whatever seeds you plant grow abundantly. Rice grains are 10 times larger and more fragrant than those near the Pacific. In your world, farming isn't necessary. Apples and sweets have no residue. They evaporate into a faint, pleasant scent unique to each person, the lighthouse keeper explained. The boy suddenly opened his eyes. I dreamed of my mother. She was in a place with a fine cabinet and books, smiling at me. I said, Mother, let me pick some apples for you. And then I woke up. Oh, we're still on the train. Here are the apples. The gentleman gave them to us, the young man said. Thank you, sir. Oh, sister is still asleep. I'll wake her up. Look, we have apples, the boy said, waking his sister. She wiped her eyes and looked at the apples. The boy ate his apple eagerly, and the beautiful peel evaporated into a gray mist before hitting the floor. They carefully stored the apples in their pockets. Across the river, a large forest full of bright red fruit stood with a high triangular marker in the center. From within came a harmonious sound of bells and musical instruments. The young man shivered with a sense of awe. Listening to the music, he felt as if a bright green field or a sunlit expanse lay before him, with drops of white wax glistening like morning dew. "Oh, look at that bird," the girl named Kaoru next to Campanella exclaimed. "That's not a crow, it's a magpie," Campanella said, scolding her lightly, making Giovanni laugh involuntarily. The girl blushed with embarrassment. Indeed, many black birds were lined up along the bright riverbank, illuminated by the soft glow. "They are magpies. The feathers at the back of their heads stick up," the young man explained soothingly. The triangular marker in the blue forest moved directly in front of the train. At that moment, the familiar hymn started from the back of the train, sung by what seemed to be a large group. The young man's face turned pale, and he stood up as if to go there, but then sat back down. Kaoru covered her face with her handkerchief, and Giovanni's nose began to sting. Without realizing it, they all started singing along. The olive forest across the Milky Way glowed and gradually faded into the distance, accompanied by the mystical sound of instruments. The peacocks could be seen spreading and closing their feathers, reflecting blue light like buttons. "Ah, I heard peacock sounds earlier," Campanella said to Kaoru. "Yes, there were at least 30. The harp-like sounds were all from peacocks," she replied. Giovanni suddenly felt unbearably sad and almost shouted, "Campanella, let's get off here and play." The river split in two, with a tall tower in the middle of the dark island. A man in a loose robe and a red hat stood on top, signaling with red and blue flags. Giovanni saw him vigorously waving the red flag and then the blue one, which he waved like an orchestra conductor, causing a sound like rain. Black objects flew in clusters like cannonballs across the river. Giovanni leaned out the window to watch, seeing thousands of small birds flying through the clear blue sky. "The birds are flying," Giovanni said. "Look," Campanella also gazed at the sky. The man on the tower waved the red flag, and the birds stopped, followed by a loud noise downstream. Then the man waved the blue flag, shouting, "Now cross, migratory birds, now cross!" And once again, thousands of birds flew through the sky. The girl leaned out the window, her cheeks glowing, marveling at the sight. "Look at all those birds, and the sky is beautiful," she said to Giovanni, who, feeling a bit annoyed, silently looked at the sky. The girl sighed softly and returned to her seat. Campanella sympathetically pulled his head back in and looked at the map. "Is he guiding the birds?" the girl asked Campanella. "He's signaling to the migratory birds." "Maybe it's for a beacon," Campanella replied uncertainly. The train car fell silent. Giovanni wanted to pull his head back in, but felt uncomfortable doing so in the bright lee, so he kept blowing his whistle. "Why do I feel so sad? I need to keep my heart pure and broad. Look at that tiny blue light far beyond the other bank. It's so peaceful and cold. I'll focus on that to calm myself," Giovanni thought, pressing his aching head. "Is there no one who will journey with me forever? Even Campanella is happily talking to that girl. I feel so lonely." Giovanni's eyes filled with tears, and the Milky Way seemed distant and blurred. The train moved away from the river, climbing the cliff. Across the river, the dark cliff rose higher downstream. Giovanni saw a field of tall corn with twisted leaves and red silk sprouting from the green husks, which glittered like diamonds in the sunlight. Campanella said, "That's corn," but Giovanni, still despondent, only looked out the window and replied, "Yes." The train slowed down, passing several signals and switches before stopping at a small station. The pale blue clock showed exactly 2 o'clock, its pendulum ticking in the silent field. A faint melody, like a thread, drifted from the far edge of the field. "It's the New World Symphony," the girl whispered. Everyone in the car seemed to be dreaming. "Why can't I be happier here? Why do I feel so lonely? Even though Campanella is with me, he's only talking to that girl. I feel truly miserable," Giovanni thought. half covering his face with his hands as he stared out the window. The train's glass whistle sounded, and it began moving slowly. Campanella whistled a lonely tune. Yes, yes, this is a high plateau, a voice from the back said. Even the corn needs to be planted 2 feet deep to grow, an elderly voice explained. Is it far to the river? Yes, it's 2,000 to 6,000 feet to the river, and it's a steep gorge. Wasn't this the Colorado Plateau? Giovanni wondered. Campanella whistled, and the girl looked at Giovanni with a complexion like a silk-wrapped apple. Suddenly the corn disappeared, revealing a vast black plain. The new World Symphony rose louder from the horizon, and an Indian, adorned with white feathers and stones, ran full speed towards the train. Look, an Indian! An Indian! The girl shouted. He's not chasing the train, he's hunting or dancing, the young man explained, standing with his hands in his pockets. Indeed, the Indian seemed half dancing. He suddenly stopped, drew his bow, and a crane fell into his outstretched hands. He smiled happily and watched them disappear into the cornfield. The train moved along the high cliff, overlooking the broad river below. Now we're going downhill. The train never comes back up here, the elderly voice said. The train sped down the hill, revealing the river below. Giovanni felt his spirits lift. When the train passed a small shack with a lone child standing outside, he almost shouted. The train slowed and settled into a steady pace. Star-shaped and pickaxe flags lined both banks of the river. What are those flags? Giovanni asked. I don't know. They're not on the map. Maybe they're building a bridge, the girl suggested. They're engineer flags. They're practicing bridging, but I don't see any soldiers, Campanella said uncertainly. Suddenly, a column of water shot up downstream, followed by a loud noise. That's an explosion, Campanella exclaimed, jumping up and down. As the water settled, large salmon and trout leaped into the air, creating circles before falling back. Giovanni felt light-hearted and said, An airborne engineer battalion. Did you see those fish jump? This is the best journey ever. Those trout must be this big up close. There are so many fish in the water, the girl said, joining the conversation. There must be small fish too, Giovanni answered, now cheerful, smiling at the girl. That's the Twin Stars Shrine, the boy suddenly shouted, pointing outside. On a low hill, 2 small crystal shrines stood side by side. What's the Twin Stars Shrine? Giovanni asked. I heard about it from my mother many times. It's a small crystal shrine with 2 standing together, the girl explained. Tell us about it. What did the twin stars do? The boy asked. I know. The twin stars went to the field and fought with crows, the boy said. No, they didn't. The twin stars' mother told them. Then a comet came, screeching gee foo, the boy said. That's another story. They're probably playing the flute now. They went to the sea, the boy said. No, they've come back from the sea, the girl corrected. Tell us the story, Giovanni said. Suddenly the opposite bank glowed red. Willow trees and unseen waves of the Milky Way shimmered red. On the field beyond the bank, a large red fire burned, its black smoke threatening to scorch the sky, glowing brighter than rubies, more beautiful than lithium, and casting a drunken haze. What's that fire? How does it glow so red? Giovanni asked. It's the scorpion fire, Campanella answered, checking his map. Oh, I know about the scorpion fire. The girl said. What's the scorpion fire? Giovanni asked. A scorpion burned to death. The fire still burns. My father told me many times, the girl replied. A scorpion is an insect, Giovanni said. Yes, but it's a good insect. Scorpions aren't good. I saw one in a museum in alcohol. The teacher said its sting is deadly, Giovanni said. Yes, but it's a good insect. My father said there was a scorpion in the ancient field of Baldra, which killed and ate small insects to survive. One day it was chased by a weasel and fell into a well. It couldn't escape and began to drown. The scorpion prayed, Oh, I've taken so many lives, and now I'm about to be taken. Why didn't I let the weasel eat me? It would have lived another day. Please, God, use my body for the happiness of all. The scorpion then saw itself turn into a beautiful red fire, lighting up the night. My father said the fire still burns, the girl explained. Look, the markers are arranged like a scorpion, Giovanni observed. Indeed, the story ends here. Sweet dreams.